All right, it is Levi here, and today we are going to be beginning Algebra Essentials. So let's talk about what this series actually is, and we're going to talk about what we'll go over, curriculums, and all that kind of stuff. So what this actually is it's a supplement to Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So there's going to be specific lessons on specific Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 topics. And I'm also going to throw in SAT Algebra Review because Algebra 1 and 2 are a huge portion of the SAT math. So if you're someone like the masses of high school students who is preparing for that standardized exam, then this will be a helpful series for you. What this series is not, at least for now, it's not going to quite be the full content of Common Core Algebra 1 and 2, and that's just because it will take too long to get everything out. So eventually it might be, but for the time being it will not get through the full content because there's a lot of it, and that's why algebra classes tend to go pretty quickly. Common Core is pretty harsh, there's a lot to cover. I'm also not sticking specifically to one curriculum. So for example, I always use the Regents exams as my example because I am a New York person. So if you don't know, the Regents exams are the New York standardized finals. So I'm not going to be specifically sticking to like that curriculum, but we are going to, a lot of the ideas between states and finals and everything else is very similar. So you still can gain something from this. Let's talk about graphing calculator resources because not everybody has a physical graphing calculator. Actually, I even don't. So if you're on a Windows computer, you can use WabbitEmu, which is short for emulator. So I'm probably actually pronouncing that wrong, but doesn't matter. That's an emulator for, it's exactly the same as the TI-84 Plus or whatever other calculator you choose to use with the emulator. Completely free. It's a great resource, and it's open source, and it's just a great piece of software. Desmos is a website, which is great, and I also listed that for Chromebooks, Chrome OS. I believe there is another alternative for Chrome OS, but I believe it's a proprietary thing, so I'm listing Desmos because it's free, and Desmos is a great resource. If you're on Mac, there's actually an app that comes installed with your Mac that is a graphing calculator. I can post a short tutorial on how to get to that maybe at some point. And on mobile, there is actually a calculator app. So I have my phone right here. Let me see if I can just pull it up quickly for you. I don't know if you'll be able to see if you look at my camera in the corner, but there is actually a calculator app. So, and that's free. So that's a great resource, and it very, very closely emulates the calculators that you would use on a standardized test. What's the difference between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2? Typically, Algebra 1 is taken freshman year. Some people take it in 8th grade as well. It depends on how your school offers it. I took it in 8th grade personally. Algebra 2 is typically taken junior year or sophomore year, depending on when you took Algebra 1. So Algebra 2, so the sequence is usually Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. Sometimes you take Geometry and Algebra 2 in the same year. I know that there's a lot of schools that offer that. That was not offered by my school, so that's not how I took it. And for the most part, I think the consensus is that you take one a year, but I could be wrong. But that's not important. What's important is that Algebra 2 is basically a review of Algebra 1 that adds more in-depth content and new ideas such as Drake. My series will include content from both, and I'm going to try to remember to specifically explain what content is corresponding with what course, because there's things that are shared between both. There's some ideas in Algebra 1 that you don't really need in Algebra 2 because you get to the more advanced stuff that you don't learn in Algebra 1 because it's too much. Finally, the topics for videos. These are just some ideas of things that we'll cover. There's a lot of content, as I said, so we're going to be covering much more than this, but we'll talk about an introduction, variables, quantities, and all of those. We're going to talk about polynomials. We're going to talk about factoring, completing the square, and the quadratic formula, statistics, probability, trigonometry, pi, e, and logarithms, imaginary and complex numbers. So there's a lot of things that we're going to cover, and I think that even if you are out of Algebra 2 and just reviewing for the SAT, I think there's going to be a lot of useful things that we can discuss here, and I hope you'll stick with us.